Christmas story is one of the most meaningful stories I think that we draw from the Bible. And as you know, the Christmas story is a combination of Matthew and Luke. Mark did not talk about the birth at all. John didn't talk about the birth. The versions of Matthew and Luke, they vary. Luke has him born in a manger in a stable. You know, that's our nativity scene. And Matthew has the wise men seeing the star from the east. And so you have a combination of your nativity scene of the wise men, the shepherds, sitting together. And that was not how the story was told originally. Luke has him born in an animal stable, as you know, and Matthew has him born in a house. So just interesting stuff, facts about how we put different sources of biblical material together to create one story. And that's what we would do. We do with the gospel. What we call the gospel, we treat it as one thing, one message. But it's a combination of the four gospels, the three synoptic gospels they're called because they're drawn from a similar source. And then we have the Gospel of John, which was known as the spiritual gospel since about the 2nd century. But before all of that, we have the writings of Paul, which appeared about 50 to 52 AD. So Paul probably had the most influence of the Gospels. Mark, we think he probably used the letters of Paul, but Mark came along 70 AD, so about 15 years after Paul wrote. So when you put all this in perspective, it's and Paul never met Jesus. The only experience he had with him was in a vision on the road to Damascus. We're all familiar with that. And he says that's his main authority is that vision. And plus, he, being a Pharisee, would go back into Scripture and see what Scripture there was there to support this idea that Jesus was the Messiah. He has what is called a Christology, a view of Jesus that is theologically based, has nothing to do with history or anything else. But some very good ideas. We'll find some excellent ideas all through the New Testament, obviously. But what I'm saying is we have drawn from many sources to create one story. And that one story doesn't exist except in the way that we've created it, we put it together. It's just an important thing to do because you will run into different problems, like people have tried to figure out what that star was, where that came from. And I read articles every year about where that star, what it was, where it came from, and, was it Venus and Jupiter coming together and forming this bright thing? And there's all kinds of theories about it. But that's only valid if we look just at Matthew. Luke doesn't care about that. Mark doesn't even pick up the birth story. John doesn't either. Paul doesn't mention it. In fact, Paul doesn't mention any or very few of the writings that scholars believe the four gospel writers drew from. He seems to be a totally independent thinker in terms of who Jesus was. But here's what's really interesting. The birth of Jesus as we know it, as Christians, as the Christian community knows it, did not occur till the writings of Paul, did not occur till the Gospels. The Jesus that most of us think of as Jesus is the creation of the church. It's not a historical figure. And we need to understand that we have no information whatsoever on his actual birth. Scholars even argue about when that happened. Many of them think that the calendar is like 8 years off. And that doesn't really matter. But it kind of matters because we gauge all of our time around that, our calendar, around what we think is the birth of Jesus. So all of that background information is helpful, and it tells us that we can take a story like this, and instead of follow the letter of the law, so to speak, that we can interpret. We can look at the story that is telling us on a spiritual level. And that's the most beautiful aspect of it to me, is the story it's telling us on a spiritual level. Because it's talking about the birth of this child born to a virgin. The father, Joseph, had nothing to do with the birth. That is significant in terms of our own spiritual understanding, and I'll talk about that today. But the visitation of the shepherds and the wise men, all of that too can play into our own personal Christmas story. And so it gives us, the more we understand about how the Scripture was put together, how the Bible was put together, the freer we are to interpret the story, because that's exactly what all of the writers did. They gave their interpretation of who they thought Jesus was. You can take all four Gospels and you can summarize who they were speaking to, their audience. You can summarize each one, and they're all four very different. They're talking to four different kinds of groups of people. And that is helpful also. But what they're doing is they're talking to people that they're presenting a picture of Jesus that those people will like. Not necessarily an historical view, but who their audience will like. Mark, for example, being the first gospel written, he's not the first in order in the way it's laid out in the New Testament, of course. But he was probably a Gentile. He wasn't even a Jew, as Jesus was a Jew. And he was writing to a group of Gentiles. And he was writing to this group of Gentiles that were actually comfortable with the Roman occupation. So he was presenting a Jesus that was comfortable with the Roman occupation. Jesus himself, we don't really know. Was he comfortable with that or not? Most of the Jews hated it. They absolutely rebelled, and they laid their lives on the line to change it. And that happened in 70 A.D. when this revolt occurred. There was one more that followed in 135 A.D., 132 A.D. But it was the Jews trying to oust the Roman Empire from their occupation. So we don't really know what Jesus thought about that, because the gospel writers, they were telling us what was going on in their life, but they were putting Jesus in that time as well. But we don't know what he thought about it. So that's what I'm really getting at, is we have a lot of license to take these stories, put them together as we do, and say, here's how we can look at them in a way that is meaningful to us. So Unity uses the term Christ as the essence of God individualized in each of us. And I think I talked about that last Sunday, that I don't need myself to use that word anymore, because the moment I say Christ, my mind goes back 2,000 years. It goes back to the man Jesus, and I think 99% of the people that you talk to, it'll be the same. If somebody said to you, do you think Christ died for your sins? Would you think they're talking about the spiritual aspect of your own consciousness, or are they talking about Jesus? So most people will be talking about Jesus. All of the New Testament, when they use the word Christ, when they use the word Messiah, when they use the word Son of Man, they're all talking about Jesus. And we today try to interpret these terms, and we are totally free to do that, because Christ was a title. It was not Jesus' last name, as we all know by now, surely. It was a title that meant the anointed, and that would certainly apply to a person like Jesus, but it would also apply to a person like you and me. There is a part of us that is anointed of God. It is the soul. It is that spiritual dimension. And so we can apply that to us. But I would prefer, just to keep things straight, to just call it the soul, or my spiritual self, or my divine self, whatever term we are most comfortable with. But we can use the term Christ, and we can do it legitimately because it was a title. Simply meant the anointed. But in the Jewish circles, the anointed would have been a priest or, what's the other thing? Well, just say a priest that would be anointed, a king or a priest that would be anointed to that office. They would be Christed. And so we would use the term correctly in that way as well. But we don't think of it that way. When we say Christ, we think of Jesus. And that was the intention of all of the New Testament. Every time you read it, the word, that's what they're talking about. So Unity uses the term Christ as the essence of God individualized in each of us. We've accepted as the basis of our identity ideas of lack and limitation. These have found expression in our minds, our bodies, and our circumstances. So we are looking at a state of duality that most of us live in from the level of consciousness. This is not a reality, it's a perception. If you are a spiritual being, you may not think that, but it doesn't change if that's true. If you are a spiritual being, you could be an atheist, but you're still a spiritual being. You may not embrace that idea, but if that is the truth of all of us, that the soul does not exist or does not depend on the existence of the body, if when the body is sloughed off, the soul continues, there's a level in us that we are unaware of a great deal of the time because we are spending so much time in the body, spending so much time dealing with the needs of the body that we forget the spiritual side. So what the Christmas story is about is remembering that spiritual dimension that is the reality of us. And when we talk about the birth of Christ, we're talking about the remembrance that I am a spiritual being. It's not a birth per se. It's a revelation. It's a realization. It's a recollection. That's one of the terms of mysticism is recollection. It's recalling what we are at the deepest level. And we forget that. We may have forgotten it our entire life. I think a lot of people do because the moment we're born, we are treated as that body. The very moment we're born, I was born July 1st, that's supposed to be the beginning of Doug, 1954. But I think I probably had an earlier start than that myself. I don't recall anything beyond that. The earliest memory I have, I think I was maybe 3 or 4. My mother was pushing me in a stroller down the sidewalk. I remember a rock wall on my left side. And I've actually found that place on Google Earth, which is really cool about that technology. I found the house that we lived in when I was that age, and I found the store that we would go to. This little kid would follow the mailman around. He had a little dog. He would always buy us bazooka bubble gum, and he always gave the dog one of the pieces of bubble gum. We just thought that was great, but we would always go to that store and get it. So I remember that stuff, but being in the stroller, we were there earlier than that particular memory, I guess. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The point is because we don't remember that we may have had a previous experience. Does anybody remember life in the womb? I have no recollection of that. I'm kind of thankful. I don't, frankly. Although we can do another story on that, because the womb really represents the Garden of Eden. It's that place where we are completely taken care of, not a care in the world other than just hanging out and doing what we do. We don't have to worry about warmth. We don't have to worry about food. Don't have to worry about much of anything. We do kind of would have to worry about that moment when we appear on the planet. That, to me, would be pretty dramatic. But Anyway, we don't have to have a memory to make it true. And that's not to force anything on anyone, because we're all free to think what we want in those terms. But I do not think that my life began with birth. It definitely didn't, there's a time in the womb when I don't remember, but I was there, obviously. But I think I was there before that. I just don't know what or where, when, or any of that. And I don't care. I'm not interested in pursuing that. Some people are. And some people claim to have that memory, but I don't. But the point that I'm making here is there's a part of us that does not depend on the body, and we have lost sight of that. It's not part of many of our daily thinking. It's not incorporated into our daily thinking. And it doesn't need to be that much incorporated in our daily thinking. But just to live your life like this is a moment of my eternal life that I'm living here. You know, if I'm going through something like I have been going through a lot of stuff lately with this move and all this, I'm so looking forward to settling into where I don't have to look at another table full of junk and wonder where it's going to go. Where we can just walk in and this is our life and we're done with that aspect of it and we do what we're intended to do here. So, but we're doing fine with all that. I think these guys have done a wonderful job as quickly moving forward as fast as they have. But there's so much of the spiritual thing that we just go through life dealing with this stuff. And it's very easy to understand why we lose sight of it. And so we take time to let this awareness be born in us, to be reborn, to reconnect with that infinite part of us, because there's more to us than what is here. So the Christmas story beautifully illustrates the path to recovering the awareness of our spiritual core. As we reestablish our identity with the Word, which is the soul, so that the Word may become flesh, full of grace and truth, and dwell among us. I have said, in fact, in my book, The Complete Soul, if you take that opening chapter of John, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. If you replace the Word, which is capital W, with the word soul, you'll have a better understanding of what that means. It's saying that the soul was always in existence, that we are eternal beings. We don't have a beginning. We don't have an end. But it was a time when we became flesh and dwelt on this planet. And that is when we incarnated, we took on a body, where the invisible aspect of us took on a visible side, and we did it so we could communicate, so we could interface with this three-dimensional world. That to me makes total sense. And it also raises questions, why would I do that? And that's something everybody has to kind of look at themselves, as to why would I want to do that? Why would I want to take on a body? And I said a couple of weeks ago, it's sort of like going to the airport, flying someplace, landing in a town, and renting a car. Why would you rent a car? Do you rent it so you can feed it and wash it and take care of it? Or do you rent it to get around, to get around the city? And if you think of your body in the same way, to me that makes a little more sense. We didn't come here to feed the body. We like feeding the body, but we didn't come here to do that. The body is our vehicle that we use to navigate through this three-dimensional experience. So why did I fly to that city? Why did I land in that particular city? You could ask everybody that got off the airplane, why did you come here? Why did you fly to this city? And why are you renting this car? And you would probably get a different answer from every single person. There's not a why. There's not an answer to that question that covers all of us, which to me is a great thing, because we're all looking for this singular answer. Why are we here? Why are we here? Well, go to any airport and ask every single person that gets off the airplane, why are you here? Why did you come here? And you will get different answers. So what if we came to realize that the Earth life is us flying to Earth for a reason, some reason that we chose? And what if we chose that reason and now it's changed? We're here driving around this city with a different reason, for a different reason. Is that all right? I think it is. Maybe there's not just one reason we came. Maybe there's several reasons. Maybe when you rent that car, you're going to go see family, you're going to go to a business event, maybe you're going to go to the zoo, maybe you're going to do 10 things. There's not just one reason that you go there. There may be one reason that gave you the excuse to go there. But you have other reasons why you're there, and you utilize that car to get around to go wherever you want. So to reestablish our identity is to say, I flew into this place. I'm not this car that I rented. It's very helpful, and I need it, and I want it. You know, you don't rent a car because you have to. You don't necessarily have to rent a car. You can do other things. Call your in-laws and have them come pick you up or whatever. But there's not just one thing that has to happen when you fly into that city, just like here. So I like to think that way because it stretches my thinking. I have tried to figure out what is the one reason I came here for. And there may not be just one reason. There's a lot of ways to enjoy this earth, to enjoy this life. And I probably came for them all. And there's some that I'm discovering along the way that I didn't know about. But that's kind of an oversimplification, but I think that's the way it works. It's beginning to make sense in my mind anyway. It doesn't have to make sense in yours. But I like to think I'm here because I want to be. I'm not here to put gas in the car only. I'm here to use this car to enjoy this journey, to enjoy this part of my life. So Mary represents the spiritually receptive intuition. She's the higher self that is open to the things of spirit. She's our intuitive nature, that part of us that knows there is more to life than this human physical existence. So when you think of Mary, you know, we've made a big thing out of Mary. She's the Saint Mary. She's this larger than life figure, just like all of the Bible figures are. Made her into something, and I don't downplay that by any means. I don't think about it. I don't embrace it. It doesn't mean to me what it would mean to a Catholic, for instance. That's very important to them. But to me, Mary, when you look at the story, she is the one that received this message from the angel that said, you're going to have a child, and this child, she said, how can this be? Because we haven't been together, my fiance and I. How can this be? And basically the answer is it'll be an immaculate occurrence. That would be a hard one to explain today, but I'm sure people have tried to use that particular one. But we get in the weeds when we start asking questions like that. How could this be? Mary is that part of us that is open to the spiritual dimension. It's intuitive. It's not the intellect. It's the intuition. We sense there is more to us than we are experiencing. We sense there's more to us than we understand intellectually. And she is that part of us. And that's how this announcement is made. The first time that it really hit me hard in a way that I understood was when I read Emily Cady's book, Lessons in Truth. And something in me opened up in a way that I can't really explain. I had never had that experience with a book. But it set aside my normal thinking, my normal logic, so that something bigger came forth. And later on that would materialize or manifest as a real spiritual insight, what I would call a mystical experience. And that did not come from my thinking, didn't come from the intellect, it came from the soul revelation. And when that happens, it's like Emily Cady raises the question, how do you know when you have touched this deeper level? And she says, you just know. You absolutely know. Just like I asked my mother when I was growing up, how will I know when I meet the right person? She said, you'll just know. Well, I knew it took me 2 times, but I got it the second time that I knew she was the one. It took her about a year. But I was a little rougher than she was probably. So, but she was right. How do you know? You just know. Something comes to you. And when I read that book, I knew it was right. And I'm not saying it was right for everybody. I'm saying that's what I needed at that time for my mind to be open. And it was not an intellectual thing. There was a real intuitive, how do I know this is right? I just know. It just feels right. And I thought it was so right that I gave the book to several people that did not think it was right. So, you can't pass it on to anybody. But I knew without doubt, because I was 16 years old and I'm still doing this. So I know it was right because I've stuck with it all my life, all my adult life. So, and same with my wife, we've been together over 45 years now. And that's, when you know, that's just kind of the way it works. And I'm not putting myself on any kind of a pedestal because that is totally meaningless. I would never teach a class, have never taught a class in how to have a successful marriage, because 2 weeks after I would do that, I would probably end up in divorce. So many of the people that I know, my friends, colleagues, have done that and contributed to, I think, our about 80% divorce rate among unity ministers. It's just incredible. But so I'm not holding myself up. I'm just saying this was my experience. And I know what it is to make that intuitive connection where Mary doesn't know how all this is going to come about, but she's told. I can't explain it, but I know. How do you know? You just know. And this whole idea of Gabriel coming and making this announcement, people make a big issue of that too. But if you just think of that aspect of yourself, the intuitive side, that part that just knows it knows, that's Mary. Joseph represents the intellectual aspect of our spiritual awakening. We must reassess the function of our intellect. Before it was the leader, the teacher, the presenter of new ideas. Now it becomes the observer, the student, the discerner of eternal truths. It beholds divine ideas that are untouched by the limitations of human thought, born out of the virgin regions of the soul. So this is kind of an interesting thing that we look at. When most of us get into this whole way of thinking, we buy a lot of books. We read a lot of books, and we should do this. It's a very important part. If you think of your bookshelf, you'll watch it gradually transform. From the beginning, it was all maybe romance novels or whatever, and it gradually becomes truth books. They're all replaced by these things that if you were like me, I couldn't get enough of it. Every time I would go to Unity Village, to church, I would buy another book. And got into all kinds of it. Emma Curtis Hopkins, Joel Goldsmith, the Fillmores, Katie, of course, all of her books. But I couldn't fill my head up enough with these ideas. It was just so beautiful. But there comes a time, I back that up, the spiritual awakening that got me there in the first place to start getting Joseph involved, that was Mary. Joseph was not involved in that beginning time. Yes, I was reading a book, but there was more to that than just the words on the page. The Mary side is the one that receives the inspiration. It's the part of us that says, you pursue and desire more because you are more. There's something in us that just knows that. And the Joseph side is the one that helps raise that Christ child. We don't know anything about Joseph as a father, but one indication that we have that he was a good one, and we don't know when he died, what happened to him, we don't know anything about him. But Jesus referred to God as his father. And to me, that says a lot about whatever relationship he had. Jesus was probably in the same profession that Joseph was in, either a carpenter, which is the general idea, or possibly a stonemason, which some of the scholars are thinking, leaning in that direction now. But it would have been the job of the father to pass on the trade, the profession, whatever that was, so the son could then take care of his own family and probably take care of the family that he was in. In the case of Jesus, when the father dies, he's the provider, and the sons begin to step in. Jesus probably did that until he entered the ministry, till he declared himself minister. And he probably did that because he was waiting for his younger brothers to grow up so they could help support his mother and sisters and all the family. And he could go off and do this experimental ministry thing. I've been doing this 40-some years. He lasted 3, so I think I'm doing pretty good at that profession. But there's an intuitive knowing when you read that first book that turns you on, that opens your mind. It's because you're responding to the intuitive level. The book represents the intellectual side, and we put all these ideas in our heads. We gradually change the way we think, and that's a good thing. But that's, if you think of Joseph as the father, he is helping raise that child. It's the intellect that is reading books, getting this information on how to nurture this spiritual awakening. And that would have been the role of Joseph. Very important role, but not the birthing side of it. And the birthing side is the intuitive side. So, big difference. So who are these shepherd people? The shepherds represent our ability to watch over our thoughts. They represent our innate ability to discern and judge from the spiritual perspective. In the same way the shepherd keeps watch over his flock by night, so we keep watch over the flock of our thoughts and feelings. And that's just kind of the ongoing experience that we're all having. When we begin reading about these spiritual ideas, when we're exposed to them, we start watching our thoughts and feelings. We understand how important these are. That it's not so much what's going on out here as what's going on in here that really matters. Because we can react to a situation in a very negative way, internally, have a very negative experience as the result of something. We all do this. We're all familiar with that side of it. But that's where okay, what do I do as a spiritual being? That's where I bring the shepherds in. We watch how we think. We watch how we feel. We watch our emotion. We watch the internal world going on, because we do have something to say about how that happens, how that unfolds. And we know that when we let that run amok, things feel pretty bad. And so we want the world to be in harmony, to be peaceful. So we call out the shepherds. They start watching over these flocks of thought and feeling that go through us all the time. So that's one way to look at them. So in daily periods of quiet, we remember that we are spiritual beings here to express the highest and best that is in us. We let go of all that is not constructive so that we may focus this wonderful energy and power on our spirit on the good. And again, that's just keeping a positive, open and receptive attitude. We're all familiar with that challenge, actually. So the wise men from the East represent the innate wisdom of the soul. Just as there is a wisdom that knows how to unfold a mighty oak tree from within a tiny, insignificant acorn, so there is a wisdom that knows how to unfold the full potential of the soul through the mind and heart of each one of us. And I've always liked that idea. I don't have to know how this works. There is something in me that does. And if I just say it's in divine order, it's all expressing as it should. That which is in me is greater than that which is in the world, and that is coming forth into my awareness. What the intellect wants to do is find the proper plan. What do I do to bring out this spiritual self? And what the intuitive side is saying to the intellect is, let it happen. Let it unfold. Let go and let God. Trust in this infinite process that is unfolding through you now. Not an easy thing to remember. It's an easy thing to do, but we don't remember that this is the way to do it, to let go and let God. You know, we've all heard that. When you're praying about something, you want some greater good to unfold, one of the most powerful things you can do is let go of all of your reaction to that, all of your expectation, everything that you have surrounded that with. And that part is not easy until you actually do it, and then you wonder why you didn't do it sooner. But this is that innate wisdom working through us. You don't have to have the controls all the time. That's Joseph, the intellect that wants to do that. So we understand, what grows the plant, what grows the oak tree. We don't know how that works either. We just know it has to have a source, an acorn that goes into the ground so this infinite wisdom can take over. So sometimes we are afraid to move out of current conditions of limitation because it doesn't appear that we have the knowledge to successfully pull it off. When we commit ourselves to growth, to changes that will encourage the bringing forth of new dimensions of the emerging soul, the wisdom we need is given as we need it. So it's brought us to this point. There's been a lot of questions along the way, no doubt, but we're here. And we will continue on and get the most out of this life that we possibly can. But that's the Christmas story from an interpretive level, one way to look at it. And there's 1,000 others, and you probably know most of them. So you know the traditional one for sure. Thank you for watching this week's program. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with others. We want to reach as many people as we can, and we appreciate your help. If you'd like to help support this ministry, just click the donate card at the top right-hand corner of your screen. Your financial support means a lot to us. We have many subjects in our video lineup, so feel free to take a look. If there's a topic you don't see and would like me to address, just put it in the comment section. I'd love to know what's on your mind. To subscribe to this channel, simply click our logo. Thanks again for your interest in independent unity, and have a wonderful week.